Everybody, welcome to Elseworlds Exchange. I am Sal, and I'm alone today because this is practically an impromptu off the rack more than an Elseworlds Exchange, but because we want consistency and we want to have an in-depth discussion, and because we promise these things from this channel, and because we are men and women of our word, I'm going to deliver. Just everybody is scattered to the winds right now, preparing for New York Comic Con, which is literally tomorrow, and I'm going to be heading out to New York for the entire 4-day extravaganza tomorrow morning, and as such I need to have all of my crap ready to go. I gotta have bags packed, equipment prepped, and batteries charged. And I got to have videos ready to go for the rest of this week, so I am all over the place. And so as such, I actually did not have more than this week's worth of comics prepped for Elseworlds Exchange. So instead, we're just going to talk about some of the books that came out this week and have some reaction to them. These are some of the top titles that came out this week. If you're looking for some side stuff, some ancillary titles, you're probably not going to find them unless they were specifically towards my sensibilities. Because what I do is on Wednesday I buy the books that I care about. I read, because I'm a fan and because I like comics myself. Just because I report on them doesn't mean that I'm not also a fan. And if you follow me on Twitter, @SalSaysWhat, you probably saw me tweet at Mark Waid and Humberto Ramos and congratulated them on their work on The Champions, which I guess we'll talk about first because it was the first book that I mentioned. But Marvel's The Champions is a funny book that has a storied history that for me is a book that I never had much interest in or took much stock in as an old school fan. But having read it this week and having The Champions more or less be it's almost like hearkening to that suggestion that Rob and I came up with back when we were talking about alternatives for the Civil War II book, and how it was like, wouldn't it have been cooler if it was old versus young, if it was older ideologies versus newer ideologies? And that's more or less what Champions is. And because not only did we say we wanted to see that, but it actually happened, I kind of dig this book. And it's with a lesser team, this book could have been hackneyed and obvious, but because it's Mark Waid and because it's Humberto Ramos on art, it's just an overall fun read. I just really, really dig this title, and I'm looking forward to getting on board right now, because damn, first of all, it's got a great lineup. Miles Morales strikes me as more of a young Peter Parker type character. I haven't really seen too much in terms of real Miles Morales character infused into him in this first issue, but it's not really about him. He's a member of the team, and he actually provides some much needed support in this title, but the emotional core is carried by Kamala Khan, aka Ms. Marvel, and it's her dissatisfaction with the Avengers overall that kind of pushes her in the direction of creating and forming the Champions. I was really curious to see how they were going to come up with the name for the Champions. Whether they were going to actually, do a deep dive and be like, there used to be a team called the Champions. But no, they just wind up calling themselves the Champions. It's kind of like, meh. Like, that is my only qualm with it, but I guess I'll approach this book based on our fundamentals from Off the Rack, which is a show that we do once a week, typically about the book that came out last week or the most recent book that we can read. So, that said, all right. Art. Humberto Ramos has been working in this industry for a very long time, and he's been doing an amazing job. I remember him from the Paul Jenkins Spectacular Spider-Man run, which I thought was like, eh. And actually, I should amend that. I remember him from his DV8 run in Image, and I loathed his art. And then he got on Peter Parker, and I saw some strengths. His proportions were odd, which of course is part of his signature style, but for me, I was like, that's a little bit weird. That said, the more he got on board, and the more work that he put in, and the longer his career went on, the more I just loved his pencil work, and the kinetic energy that is infused in every panel is just so freaking cool. I loved his work during Amazing Spider-Man. I was so excited when Amazing Spider-Man relaunched. when he was going to be the penciler on the title. Unfortunately, it didn't last very long. But now that he's on Champions, I'm excited to see him kind of drawing more Spidey type stuff, and that's going to be really cool. Overall, I just dug it. There are some really great like key moments that Mark Waid is make sure to have. Ramos infuse into the book. We got a Hulk holding a mountain scene. We got to see the Avengers or the champions forming. We got to see youth. There's a moment that I really kind of say is more kudos to Mark Waid, but in lesser hands, it could have looked lame and it could have looked weird. But it's just, there's a moment at the end of the book. I don't want to spoil too much of it, but I will say that there's a moment where it's a key moment in which all the characters are looking at their phones. And I thought it was a hilarious kind of nod to the youth and to a younger demographic and a younger audience and a younger cast in general. Just taking a slice of life moment from today and putting it on display. I was like, that was cool. And it could have been stupid, but it wasn't. So kudos on Champions. I like the concept. I like where they're going with it. I'm hopeful that this team will stick to this book. Also, of course, seeing Viv joined on the title is awesome. But yeah, let's get into Mark Waid's writing. I was not a huge fan. Like Sam, Miles, and Kamala, I was not a huge fan of the Avengers, particularly the all-new, all-different Avengers. It wasn't the roster that gave me pause and made me kind of like reevaluate the book, but it had more to do with just the inconsistent art and the constant kind of like it just felt like it was spinning its wheels, to be perfectly honest. I was just kind of like, nah, I didn't really jive with it. I felt like I'd seen it before. Once again, one of the issues with having a thing called all new, all different, you've got to have something be different and new. And all new, all different Avengers was just not enough new and not enough different. This is the all new, all different Avengers. These champions, I think they were great. Viv is one of my favorite breakout characters. I didn't even, it's weird to say that Viv is a breakout character because she was an amazing character. Red Samurai Cyclops is not in the book. He'll be in the next book. But, and actually it's amazing because the book teases at other youthful characters from the Marvel Universe who you might probably see slide in and replace other characters throughout the Champions. So I'm hopeful that we're going to see more characters, hopefully from the Young Avengers and from the Runaways and from, we definitely got a tease that Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur will probably wind up on the Champions at some point or another. It's cool. It's a great place for young characters in the Marvel Universe that have no home and that don't really sell very well overall, before we establish like this team, and we don't know if Champion's going to sell very well. But that said, I love Vision. I love what Tom King did with it. I was wary of who was going to pick up threads from that title because it's just such a good book, and I'm always very worried whenever somebody is like chiefly responsible for the quality and then they pass the torch to somebody else. And while this is not a torch passing, it is definitely the utilization of a new character that Tom King expressly created. And let me tell you, Viv's fun, and I'm more excited to see where she goes. And Mark Waid knows how to handle characters, whether they're young or old. And so that's awesome. And so overall, I gotta say, at the end of the day, Champions #1 is a great title, and it is infusing that kind of like youth and excitement and morality and adventure that you would want to see from a Marvel title that is sorely lacking in Marvel right now. And that's kind of the funny thing about this, is that it's also clearly after Civil War II. It is, and by the way, proof that nothing of any real note or significance happens in Civil War II, at least none that really make any difference or any bearing on the young characters in the Marvel Universe. But yeah, I like the status quo of Marvel right now through Marvel, through the lens of Marvel now, not necessarily like right now with Civil War 2 and with their constant renumbering, with their double numbering. They're going to be doing 2 numbers now. Marvel needs to go through a kind of reboot of themselves. We were talking about this a little bit on the Weekly Poll private chat. Somebody said, I think it was Rob said Marvel just needed to reboot, and I said no, Marvel doesn't need to reboot. Those characters haven't done anything wrong. Those characters haven't lost their way. The problem is the company needs a reboot. Marvel writers and editors need to reevaluate what is happening with their company and how to approach their publishing style. But that's another story for another time. But anyway, I dug the hell out of Champions, and I like the potential that it has. Of course, the cover has to lie to you. If you were expecting to see Cyclops, guess what? He ain't in the book until the very end, and it's more of a teaser for the next issue. Staying on the Marvel train, I apparently am some kind of masochist, and I read Amazing Spider-Man number 19, written by Dan Slott with art by Giuseppe Camuncoli. Camuncoli's back, and if only he weren't. I don't like his faces, I don't like his people, I don't like his rendition of the Parker cast. That said, I've said it a million times, so I'm just going to point that out right now and then just move on. The art is fine. There's actually a really, really great moment it's a great looking Spider-Man, and it's one of the first. It's like a full page image of just Peter Parker Spider-Man like swinging or saving a scaffold or something like that. I was like, that's cool, that looked really good. But then you see all these human beings and you're like, oh, they all look like goblins, and not the kind of goblins that you would expect to see in a Spider-Man book. But that said, nothing happens in this book again, except for perhaps the death of another character, but in a story that is subtitled Death No More, or Dead No More, the clone conspiracy, that death is meaningless, and it's undercut by any drama or emotion is undercut by what can be undone thanks to plot. I will say, I liked this issue more than the last probably 5 to 10 issues. I kind of dug this one a little more because there was an emotional core at the end of it. There was this MacGuffin that was created for the event, for this moment. I was like, okay, cool. Spider-Man has to go and retrieve this item for a loved one, and it goes about as well as you'd expect. And in fact, it's actually funny how that moment runs parallel to an episode of back issues that is coming out in the next couple of hours. So keep that in mind when you're watching the next back issues. But that said, the clone conspiracy. What can I say? I think, by the way, I'm just tossing this out there. This has nothing to do with the book itself. But I theorize that there might be an element of time travel involved. That it might be more of a shit, what was the name of that movie that we were all talking about? I asked the ComicPOP gang, like, what's that movie that in which there was like a race car driver and you go back in time? They would pull people from like near death or right before death and pull them into the future and then use them. I think it started with an F. Doesn't matter. But anyway, my theory is that the clone vessel is actually a time machine, and it plucks people out from the moment before they die. And so instead of them actually like being cloned, they're actually just pre-characters. It's not Looper. It's Flatliners. Thank you, Omar. No, Flatliners. That's about people dying and then seeing dream worlds. That is not Flatliners. I'm sorry. It is not Flatliners. Anyway, I'm moving on from that. Doesn't matter. That said, I think that like them going through time, it like maybe it. Free Jack. Thank you, Red Samurai. It's Free Jack. That like when they go through time, like the outer layer of skin is burned off because of the travel through time. That's why the Electro character got her like tattoos and her piercings removed. So I was like, yeah, it might be like Free Jack. But anyway, we'll see. Don't worry about what Free Jack is. It's not a very good movie. Anyway, that's just me being a nerd and being a fan. I'm just like, oh, you know what? Anyway, that said, meh. This book had there was like the germ or the seed of a Spider-Man comic in there. I was like, oh, yes, that was in there. There's this heirloom. I'm like, yes, that's Spider-Man. But then there's all this crap around it, and no one acts in character, and it's just really frustrating. But that said, Amazing Spider-Man number 19 is a pass, but only because I'm not gonna. I can't recommend anything that's happening in Amazing Spider-Man right now. If you're just joining us, by the way, I just wanted to point out that this is going to be more of an off-the-rack kind of episode of Elseworlds Exchange, where I just kind of review books that came out this week that I read, and talk about them a little bit at length, and get a little bit into the nitty-gritty about the issues themselves. Just because we're prepping for New York Comic Con, which, of course, everyone from the gang will be at. I'll be there probably with Cape Joel tomorrow after like 12 p.m. So everybody is kind of going to be there, and it's going to be really, a lot of fun. But I'll save all that for the end of the episode. But yeah, Amazing Spider-Man number 19, meh? Yeah, meh, as opposed to boo. Like, I don't like this series, but this was okay, because there was a little bit of a Spider-Man story in there. Batman number 8, which was written by Tom King, and co-written, by the way, by, let me just pull him up right here. Damn it. Well, anyway. It's written by Tom King and art by, shit. You know what? I need to actually get that information. Let me take a look here. Because it's just so good. Here we go. It is written by Tom King and Steve Orlando, and the script is actually by Steve Orlando, and art by Riley Rossmo. Damn. Okay. Let me tell you something. Batman versus monsters. You know, superficially, it sounds like a rad idea, right? But critically, it sounds like a definitively not Batman story. It sounds like a cash grab, and of course, you're thinking about the Marvel story that's coming out, I think, at the end of the year or after the end of the year, which is about monsters. You know, you're kind of like, oh, more monsters, okay. This is cool. Night of the Monster Men is just overall very cool, and the reason why it's cool is because it's handled with a steady hand, and the person isn't going off the rails, because while you can do really, really successful Batman stories that are just completely, not, forgive the pun, but batshit insane, this is just Batman solving yet another problem. At no point is Batman fazed or surprised by monsters, and it's very kind of cool. The monster designs are great. Riley Rossmo's art is worth the price of admission alone. It's just so great to see the Bat family working together and seeing Batman kind of work in conjunction with them. It takes all the strengths that I hailed upon the Detective Comics book and brings them into the main Bat title, because the main Bat title normally is about Batman, Alfred, maybe Nightwing every once in a while, but it's mostly about Batman. This is at the core a Bat family event, and it's not done where the Bat family can be handled in their own respective titles, but Batman is about Batman's handling of it. No, it's actually really, really solid, because you don't just see Batman's perspective. You don't see Batman like take down one monster for 32 pages. You see Batman handling a problem, delineating tasks, working with people, and coming up with escapes from doomsday moments, and also doing detective work as well in his head. It's a pretty solid book. Is it what I've come to expect from Batman over the last 5 years? Hell no. If you asked me, after reading, after getting through all of Snyder and Capullo's book, like, hey, how about if Batman fought monsters in the next run, would you be on board for that? Oh, objectively, hell no. Just Batman fights monsters, and it's a derivative of the Venom formula, and Hugo Strange and Psycho Pirate are involved. It's just a lot of... I'm like, what? I would be very skeptical of it. The execution is really solid. I'm actually kind of interested to see how they're going to collect it, because there are actual consequences and moments that you kind of need from the ancillary titles, which I hate. But I don't need them. I'm getting windows into what's happening in the other books through Batman, and so I don't need to go buy them. That's for me. If you gotta do that kind of thing, if you gotta do tie-ins, if you have to pull in, the Nightwing book, if you gotta pull in Detective Comics, if you gotta pull in the other books, make it so that I don't have to buy them, but it only enhances what's happening. Because I hate having to buy another book that I would never buy just to get more story from the main title. Conrad asked, how is Hugo Strange involved? Hugo Strange wound up inventing some kind of ridiculous formula from his, various sources that turns the dead into giant Attack on Titan-esque monsters. It's pretty cool. You don't need to read the tie-ins, by the way. I'm just saying that it's like you could, and it would only provide a richer reading experience, which is rare. But yeah, I dug Batman. I thought it was cool. I hope it ends soon, though, because I don't know how much longer I can enjoy watching Batman fight monsters. But with Riley Rossimo on board, I think I would be on board a lot longer than I normally would be. Okay, so getting into... let's talk about Superman, because it's a book that I've consistently read, and I haven't read Superman consistently since probably 1996, because that was when Death of Superman happened, and that's the only time I gave a shit about what Superman was up to. But that said, Superman is one of the best DC titles going right now, and it's purely because DC gave a shit and gave like really, really intelligent people the job. Peter J. Tomasi, Patrick Gleason doing the story. I can't think of anybody better working on a Superman title right now. This one also has Doug Mahnke on art, and he does a really nice job. I'm not a huge Doug Mahnke fan, but he renders everything with dignity, grace, subtlety. There's big moments, there's small moments. He knows how to handle characters. He knows how to handle emotive moments. But there's always this issue, talking about the art for a minute, that every artist has with Jonathan Kent, with the kid. For some reason, they have this issue where they draw his face, and he looks a little bit like an alien, or he doesn't look like a human being, and it's just kind of weird that across the board most people slip at some point or another in their design of this character. For the most part, he looks great. But there's always that moment where I'm like, whoa, what happened with his face right there? What's wrong with your face? But that said, Mahnke draws dinosaurs. Mahnke draws Superman rescuing his son. He draws his son rescuing his dog. He sees his dog. That's the other thing. He draws animals really well. It's just great. It's just really cool. It's just a great looking book. But let's talk about the writing. Peter J. Tomasi and Patrick Gleason give us a father-son story about, and in the way that you only expect Superman and his son to have a kind of like bonding experience. They go into either an alternate dimension or a excitingly folded into continuity realm. They go to Dinosaur Island, which we've seen thanks to Darwin Cook's brilliantly mastered New Frontier, and that's not the only thing we get from New Frontier that's in there, so I'll just leave it at that. But it's that moment you're like, holy freaking crap, that's cool. I don't know where we are or what's happening, but I'm on board for what this book has to offer. By the way, I also suspect that Escape from Dinosaur Island will be more or less like 2 issues. I don't expect it to run for 4 issues or 6 issues or whatever. I think it'll just be a quick kind of story that wraps up, and then Superman and his son will return, and Lois will be like, did you have an okay day? And they're like, oh, just a typical day at the office, that kind of thing. But Superman is consistently great. You go and pick up Superman. There's only 9 issues, so if you're on the fence, like, read the first arc of Superman by by Tomasi and Gleason, because that will be your litmus test. If you are not on board for what happens in that book, if you're not on board for the writing and character work on that book, then you're probably not going to like anything else that's happening. But anyway, Superman, it's great. Just overall, I recommend it entirely. Then we are going to wrap up with this book that is literally a sequel to a book that I've loved since, I don't know, for 10 years, and it's Jessica Jones, which is written by Brian Michael Bendis with art by Michael Gaydos. This is literally just Alias again, but in the Marvel Universe proper, and of course Marvel Max is gone. But you know what's funny? They figured out how to handle not having Marvel Max anymore, but making Jessica Jones work. And how they did that was by putting a big parental advisory, not for kids sticker on it. But yeah, that said, I was worried that they were going to retcon Jessica Jones's design thanks to the show and just be like, okay, Jessica Jones is more of a full-figured brunette. I'm going to make her a rail-thin, raven-haired character, but no, she just looks exactly like Jessica Jones. That said, we're of course in a place where Bendis doesn't like to just do linear storytelling, where he's like, oh, here's what happens and here's where they're going. No, Jessica Jones is a mystery. Jessica Jones is a character study about this character who we thought we'd never really see her get her own book again, and yet thanks to the success of the Netflix show, we do, and Bendis does not give a shit about that show because there's nothing like that show in this book except for everything that you liked about the show that was reflective in the book. The book is just a sequel to the original Alias series, but, 10 years later or whatever. Like, we're dealing with the fallout of Jessica Jones and Luke Cage being married and having a kid, yet still wanting to do a book about Alias investigations, and also, of course, taking that noirish private detective kind of story and playing with that, and playing with that angle and integrating it into the overall plot. Bendis is back to roots with this book. Bendis knows how to handle this character. He steps back into her with no stumbles. The dude is great when he's handling one character. When he's handling an entire book full of like many characters, it's kind of iffy, unless it's called New Avengers, in which case I really dig that book. But otherwise, I've seen him handle, multi-character stories, and it's kind of meh. This series is exactly like it was. So if you loved Alias, you're going to probably really like this issue. So if you're kind of curious about it, I would say meh, don't. If you didn't like Alias, or you're kind of on the fence, or you really want to know what's up with Jessica Jones, I don't know if this book is for you, but because it makes no attempt to contextualize what's happening or get you involved. But then again, I think it's good because it gets you on the ground floor. You don't know what's happening, and even if you did read Alias, you still have no idea what's happening in this book, so that's kind of cool. I did not read Death of X, so I'm going to move on from there and just say, Gatos' art, by the way, is also really, really good. There's no change from what it was to what it is. If you liked his art, it's still great. If you didn't like his art, it's exactly the same. So that's all I can say about that. Check it out because it's pretty sweet. Those are the books that I read today. I've been flying around, grabbing everything I can, and charging batteries, erasing SD cards, making sure that the 2 extra back issues episodes that we shot this week are safe and secure and ready to be edited when I get back from New York Comic Con. So keep that in mind. So for the next minute or so, I guess I'll just wrap up by saying there are a lot of other books that came out this week that I just didn't get a chance to read that I will hopefully get a chance to read before New York Comic Con starts, because there's a lot of new shit. Death of X came out. I heard there's some other titles that came out that I just totally missed. I just completely missed out on, which is weird. That I would have not heard that certain titles came out. But anyway, that said, I've also been avoiding Death of X, and I gotta say, I'm not gonna support that initiative. So I really don't want to do that. But we might just read it for Off the Rack. That might be the way to go. We'll save Death of X for an actual episode of Off the Rack, which will probably be a more appropriate venue for that title. But so. All right, everybody. If you are not familiar with this channel, of course, you can check us out here on ComicPOP, 5 shows a week. At least we try our hardest to make sure that happens. Of course, every Wednesday, live at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can catch me and usually another host. This is the first, last, and only time you will ever see me by myself reviewing comics on the Elseworlds Exchange. But check us out there. And if you are going to be in the New York area, please come to the New York Comic Con and meet us and say hi, hang out with us and everything. And we will be doing a weekly pull panel on Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Well, you're going to be there, so weekly pull panel, 3 p.m. In room 1A24 or something like that. So check it out. And follow me on Twitter for more information about where we're going to be, when we're going to be there. Saturday there's going to be a signing. I don't remember what booth it is, but it's going to be Saturday in the autograph area at 1:45 p.m. So anyway, stay tuned for that, and we'll see you guys next time with another episode of Elseworlds Exchange. And stay tuned for in the next 2 hours for a brand new episode of Back Issues, which is the show that you guys all come here to watch anyway. So thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.